Dear friends, it's so pity that I cannot be with you now when we recall the life and achievements of Israel Moisеевич Gelfand, who was exceptionally important for my life, whom I knew more than 55 years, and I could be now to divide our memory with my friends. Many I knew for many years and love them. But anyway, follow advice of Pasha. I decided to try to say a few words, and I choose to pay attention on some point in absolutely extraordinary biography of Israel Moisеевич. So he lived 96 years and was and 80 years of his life were completely dedicated mathematics. No any doubts that it's most important part of his life. I remember our last talk short time already before his death. He had very clear idea that he, for example, met me, his student, and time to time collaborator. He need to talk about mathematics. In '95, I believe he was very good in mathematical talk, but in last time he said a woman who took care about him, Rita, and she, understanding that we will talk at Russian and she could be part of talks, that no, Rita, we will talk with Sini about mathematics. So please leave us too. But he already, I tried to talk with him about all things which we discussed with him together, but he already could not follow it, and he himself then understand this situation. So almost 20 years of this life he lived in United States. It also was quite unusual adventure to move in completely different country when you are 77 and to build new life in completely new condition. And his experience was, I believe, quite successful. It was not equivalent Moscow, his Moscow life and seminar here was not equivalent, and he had no so many people permanently around him. But he found a way to live quite full, authentic life. I want to say, as I mentioned, I want to recall several things which always were enigma for me. For example, beginning of his life. He lived around 12 years. He stayed in a small Ukrainian town with a Jewish community, and in this time he had, I would be saying, very strong call from somewhere outside that this mathematics something absolutely remarkable, and he wanted to find what is it and how much, and how to find a way in this enigmatic area. And it's not usual way when small people, when kids in this age like solve a difficult problem and enjoy it by it. No, he wanted just to see mathematics and as whole, as some unique subject, and step by step he reconstructed something. Uh, Basically, as I understood, uh, by beautiful geometrical textbook of Kiselev, which now exists in English, and some strange textbook on differential calculus in Ukrainian, and he built for himself some very interesting and quite close to existed world. He wrote, he said always that it was his first, it was 6 years between, let's say, 12, maybe 16, when he moved at Moscow. It was pure experiment. Something which happened in history mathematics, for example, with Ramanujan, and it's interesting that something from this mathematics probably was in the air of this town Krasные Okna, since there was another boy, practically in the same age, David Milman, who eventually started to be quite famous mathematician, Crane-Milman theorem. His son also very well known in mathematical world, and they spent a lot of time together. Of course, it was some competition. Already when Israel Moisеевич was older, 90, I understood once that Milman was probably had higher rating, but Israel Moisеевич explained me that the teacher understood probably the possibilities, his possibilities. Anyway, it's also not first time in history. Then it was moving at Moscow, when he can use in National Library, Lenin Library, any books which he wanted. Short times when he can also work, and he did correction in his mathematical picture of world, and already, and then it was all in 1931. So when he was 18, he was admitted as graduate student to Moscow University, and then started his formal educational and mathematical life, who was very successful. So it was, there is a lot of stories about mathematical Cinderella, how somebody from great famous mathematician remarked him in Lenin Library, but Israel Moisеевич didn't confirm me that it was indeed the case. Anyway, so in 18 in 18 he was already in graduate school. It was a fantastic shortcut, but I want to that we also remember the reason of this shortcut. That a direct way education was completely unavailable for him. not since he was a Jew. After October Revolution, it was all Jewish people were free, they can be educated, but if they had proletarian roots, if, as in the case of Israel Moiseyevich, uh, they had some properties, they were not worker, it's absolutely impossible. Only such fantastic shortcut, which realized Israel Moiseyevich, was a chance. So as a result, he did not had before graduate school. He did not had middle. He didn't graduated at middle school. So this his family tried to find for him good profession, and he for a while, as well as David Milman, they were student in chemical professional school, but they were fired from this school as a result of their origin. Anyway, then it was eventually quite successful years. He received in next 10 years he received all degrees which just appears, and in 1941 he already was a professor of Moscow University and 28. I must say that what was typical is that Israel Moiseyevich very carefully and very with big choice discuss events of his life for this first period and from other periods of life, since it was really dangerous in Russian life. By the way, it started not at the revolution. I remind you famous story from Condorcet about Euler when he moved to Berlin and Queen Mother met him on instead Friedrich, and she tried to talk with him. She was surprised. By why do you wish not to speak with me at all? A reply followed. Madame, forgive me, but I am unaccustomed to it. I came from country where he who speaks is hung. So it's quite old tradition. Then it was choice of direction, what to do. Israel Moiseyevich was very, very careful in this choice. It was the final but yet active period of losing school in Moscow. And natural occupation was in some frames of this school. But Israel Moiseyevich was trying to find something completely another, and it's very early, it was functional analysis, and then it was great steps, theory of operators, then Banach algebras, and eventually representation theory, one of his greatest achievements. And as I want to share with you some my memory as a witness. So it was very unusual choice. Israel Moiseyevich, as I know, never seriously try to solve some classical problem. We can say that it's was his choice, but honestly, I'm not sure that it was real way for him. But it basically, for example, in Moscow, if you look on mathematician of generation close to him, almost everybody had in his backpack some classical problem which was solved. So I know that it was many discussion if it's possible, such mathematician, where you try to build something new, and if you don't solve any problem, what is then criterion that you build as a story? I know that very good, very serious, very mathematician were sure that for mathematics are necessary such key problems which people need to keep as aims as for orientation. I remember, for example, talks with Pyotr Sergeyevich Novikov, father of Sergei Novikov, absolutely fantastic mathematician and beautiful personality. And I could see that he didn't see any way to just work with such orientation. He was absolutely honestly look work of mathematician as life around such problem. This property of Israel Moisеевich clearly understand mathematician of my generation. It was Arnold who, when it was 75th birthday, a small meeting on Moscow Mathematical Society, when he talked about it, that Israel Moisеевich showed him that there is such mathematician which just try to follow some future, some aim in future. And then just this year, Sergei Novikov also said very strong and very warm words that nobody could see what can give different things is mathematics. It's his personal experience and Israel Moisei's intuition and prediction and predictions were fantastic. Of course, there were mathematicians which work similar way, maybe Lagrange, maybe Cauchy, but maybe Euler. But by the way, Euler also, I remind you that in the beginning of 20th century, it was famous decision of Petersburg Russian Academy that Euler is just outstanding mathematician, but not great, and so he doesn't deserve a monument in St. Petersburg. But more important also, don't forget that it was another point of view. I had, of course, not from first immediate communications point of view that such, I would be say, cheap mathematics, where you can do everything what you want and don't try too much effort to solve a specific problem, were connected with Jewish mathematics. It's their style which corresponds their traditions. It was not. It was quite a strong point of view about which I had many times. By the way, again, it was not first time. It was Steiner's talk about Jewish geometry at Germany. And of course, Israel Messiah was symbol of such kind mathematics. Anyway, he was very famous, and we cannot don't recall about his another side, his pedagogical activity. Again, I don't know why, but in Russia, don't collect and don't preserve information. I know just a little about his activity as professor of Moscow University. Just a couple things I heard about Evgeny Borisovich Gindikin. Maybe he is on the conference. How he was as professor. In the beginning, usually not too popular, and for a long time he spoke Russian with very strong Yiddish accent, and it was several very popular professors, Delaunay, but eventually, usually, he recalled his first algebraic course where he started linear algebra. He started to be eventually most popular the strong students. He basically was one of pioneers famous Moscow Olympiads, and eventually it was very typical, as I heard from Evgeny Borisovich, that usually his style, he tried to build some professional relations with students. He suggested usually to write with him new textbook. For example, he suggested to do it to Gindikin and Conrad. Eventually, this famous book on linear algebra was published with support. It was prepared with support of Fomin. And then, as part of this program, it was famous seminar. It's difficult to say. Again, Evgeny Borisovich was one of his first students. One of the reasons was that it was the war. It was principle, and he recalled when Israel Messiah always thought about procedure. In the beginning, students had titles of furniture, and only them were dedicated to members. And what I want to say here, that part of this problem that very soon that he had much more ideas than he can realize. So he need to, it was, he decided that it was necessary for him to build some collective work. And of course, he did quite much for many people. I would be saying that he had not too many for his activity direct student, but his influence on practically all strong Moscow young mathematicians without any doubts. Arnold, Novikov, Manin, in some point, always in different way, participate in this seminar, and everybody today, many of them talk about influence of Israel Messiah. And when Israel Messiah tried to teach people around on seminar, don't forget that he always for him important was to study himself. So for him, it was also a process of study. So it was not completely unselfish process. By the way, and also I recall such thing that Israel Messiah, of course, perfectly knew that he never solved classical problem. But also, he several times I heard from him that it's not the same to solve to work on difficult problem. By the way, it's this famous story where Arnold said that for him it was Israel Messiah who told him that it's necessary not only solve difficult problem but also to open you a way. Then in the process of arithmetic, when different mathematicians recall different result of Israel Messiah, Israel Messiah turned several times to Arnold and said, Dima, it's very difficult result. So it was something which you understand about such opinion. Okay. Now I want to say that something what happened in around 1953, it was also very important point which we not only often discuss. Israel Messiah started to change style of his mathematical work. Before, it was only every moment, it was basically one area of work. Banach spaces and operators, then Banach algebra, which then called normed rings, unitary representation of complex semi-simple Lie groups. And then on very short period of time, he changed. For example, he very much changed his style of work on representation theory. He finished fantastic. They stopped to work together with Naimark. It was one of most brilliant collaboration. He started to do many different things, inverse problems, generalist function, different stuff from differential operators, many people around him, not concentration in one direction. I don't know what it was reason, what it was consequence, but also it was difficult time. It was difficult time in the life in Russia. Fortunately, in mathematics was not. Stalin personally never took care about mathematics. It's written in at first circle of Solzhenitsyn, where he tried to choose some area for his care and choose linguistic, fortunately, for mathematics. But anyway, it was also time deep anti-Semitism. And in this moment, I know it's not directly, but from very trustful source, that in a short time, he was fired from as professor Moscow University, and simultaneously from Steklov Mathematical Institute, where he was chairman of Department of Functional Analysis. By the way, it was in university he was fired since they started to fight with work simultaneously in different places, so he was fired since he has permanent job in Mathematical Institute, and from Mathematical Institute he was fired since he has a job in Steklov Institute. But what interesting is that both orders were signed the same person, director of Steklov Institute, academician Vinogradov, and vice rector of Moscow University, academician Vinogradov. Around this time, he started to work in Keldysh applied mathematics in the beginning department and then institute. He was strongly involved in classified work. I believe for several years it was a way to survive. He was very successful, but again, we know just a little. Sakharov, in his memoirs, mentioned collaboration with Israel Moiseyevich. Also in Moscow, where was just now Centennial Conference, was some information about this work. Israel Moiseyevich, I believe, didn't like to recall this his work also, but it was very strong byproduct. His work in differential equation. By the way, behind seminar, it was also famous each year one course, one mathematical course. I listened last of this course about representation. It was basically it was fifth volume of theory of distribution. He already stopped after this to teach course. Sometimes it was extra seminars in the same month. Okay, so it was not simple to live and work in Soviet Union, and it was not simple to survive there. It was people. It was not just too much care not discuss these things. I remember perfectly my father, who also very carefully, very little discuss situation with his origin, with his. Anyway, what I show is that Israel Moiseyevich had very happy and very successful mathematical life. And what I want to mention that Israel Moiseyevich always very early started to seriously care about his health. And also he was care about his mathematical health. I remember many times he repeat, if you want to consider successfully work when you are 40, you need to continue to read, to continue to study new things all your life. There are different kinds of mathematicians. Some people continue to solve interesting problem as soon as possible, but there are people who try to guess the future. I think that Israel Moiseyevich was one of best in prediction future of mathematics, and he tried to do. His collaborator knows how fantastic predictor was he. By the way, it's very interesting. Many mathematicians think about future. We know several interesting examples. Some people, great mathematician, thought about the end of mathematics in different keys, Leibniz and Lagrange. By the way, Euler recalls that in last years, Euler tried to guess how it will possible to learn mathematical news and parodies. And his conjecture was that it possible knew what is true, what is not, but on some reason difficult to new proofs. And I think it was not just a joke for him. And Israel Message many times on his seminar discuss future, and I think he guessed about many things. He was very good in building conjectures. His famous talk where he state some future, and we know how they were exact and had influence and future development of mathematics. And I heard of many people who work with Israel Message, that in such form he continually live with us. We often try to guess how he would be think about such and such things. So I finish here, and I thank you very, very much.